program. We're now moving into our career advice panel, and we're very happy and honored to have here with us today members of the faculty board of the European Law and Governance School. Each member of the panel will spend 5 to 10 minutes talking about themselves, about their career, or as long as they have energy for. I think we can forgive a little bit Professor Duarte. He's already taught 6 hours today to our undergraduate students. And then afterwards, of course, we're going to invite you to ask some questions, perhaps tips that are going to help you in your decision-making process, either for studies or for where you're going to go after you finish your programs that you're currently enrolled to. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce first Professor Mario Chiti. He's the president of the faculty board of the European Law and Governance School. Professor Chiti, he's a professor of administrative law at the University of Florence.
I was.
Yes, was. And a professor of European administrative law at the Department of Law at the Luis University in Italy. He's also involved in many other things. He's written many publications, and I'll leave it up to him to tell you more about himself and his career. So please, Professor Chiti.
Thank you. Dear students, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I could sing my way, my academic way, and not only academic way, also professional way, because I think that we could arrange a good combination between scientific interest, professional interest, and also public responsibilities for the state, for public bodies. This is my way, anyway. Firstly, my present position is of emeritus professor at the University of Florence, now teaching as professor in Rome at the Luis University. I'm teaching European administrative law there. I am also, of course, president of this group, the faculty board in the school, which is a privilege and also a great responsibility, of course. Secondly, I am proud to say that to be a Jean Monnet chair ad personam, so on a personal base, because the European institutions recognize me as one of the experts or code experts on this field of interest. Then I am also a professional man. I am a lawyer before the Supreme Court of my country, which is Italy, before the Court of Justice of the European Union, and also in other European jurisdictions. My third interest, occupation, responsibility is to have been, to be also today, a member of public bodies, state commissions for law reform and similar opportunities. I think that it is a duty, a real serious duty for a lawyer to give support to the institutional and law reform everywhere, not only in my country. For that, I worked not only for the Italian Republic, but also for many regions, local authorities in Italy, and then for the European institutions, especially for the European Parliament, which recently discovered the other side of the moon, discovering that the Union has not only a constitutional base and many constitutional issues, but also administrative interest and administrative topics. For that, I was member of 2 or 3 committees for giving advice to the European Parliament for a possible regulation on administrative procedure and new administrative remedies. So in order to guarantee not only the interest via jurisdiction, via the courts, but also via administrative remedies. My scientific interests are at the moment on the most recent developments of European public law, especially European Monetary Union and the Banking Union. I share this interest also with other members of the faculty, as Professor Gorzos and others. I think that these new developments are quite interesting, not only for me, but most of European people inside and outside the so-called Eurozone. In brief, 2 or 3 minutes about my career, which could be of interest not only for myself, but also for you, because it's a model of a student trained in one of the best colleges of Italy, the Scuola Normale Superiore in Pisa, the law college of the school, where I studied for 6 or 7 years, firstly as a student for the law degree and then for the PhD. At the time, it was 60s, 70, early 70s of last century, the public lawyers were totally domestic lawyers, studying just national issues, very traditional textbooks, excluding some new thinkers as Professor Giannini, a few others. For that, I was, in my first stage of academic career, very, very traditional in the main trend of the tradition. But early after the degree and after the PhD, I realized that it was impossible, certainly, to remain a pure lawyer, studying just law, and leaving apart other important social sciences as history, sociology of law, social sciences in general. Secondly, I discovered on a personal basis, without any real influence, but from my master or other leading colleagues, senior colleagues, I discovered that there was already a sort of European framework for these issues. And for that, I applied with success for a series of scholarships, not only in Europe, but also in Canada and other places where, strangely, these issues were already studied, especially in Montreal, at the McGill University. Then I spent one very formative, very seminal year at the London School of Economics at the late 70s of last century, under the tutorship by a real master, John Griffith, and his school, Carol Harlow, the young Rick Rawlings, the young Jeffrey Jowell, now all Jabali, of course. And they had the same attitude as me about the new public law. A new public law based firstly on the comparison, and then on the harmonization of our legislation, the case law, the principles, the legal institutes. Not by chance, in that period, England, I don't speak about UK because UK is more complicated. England approved the reform of the judicial review, very important reform, at the end of the 70s, last century. The starting point for a real public law there. Then, also in some peculiar places, as the European University Institute in Florence, my town where I am living now, where were created new chairs, new courses about comparative public and administrative law, and the first chair were about European administrative law, held by Professor Jürgen Schwarze, the famous professor of the Freiburg University in Germany. I think he has been the creator of this field of law. Then, in a very quick way, many other courses were created around Europe, and we also decided to have a permanent base here in Athens with the young Professor Flogaitis and the general supervision of the masters of this country as Spiliotopoulos, Daktoglu, and other leading lawyers of the time. And we created the group called the European Group of Public Law, and having regular annual meeting or in the mainland or in the island of Spetses, having the spirit of Spetses, the very nice island not far from here. And thanks to this idea, we created, since the mid of 80s, a real European group of people sharing the same views, sharing the same attitudes about the researching and also the teaching of this matter. We decided early also to practice on these fields because, as said at the very beginning of this short speech, I think that there is a good positive circular influence between the scientific research, the teaching on these fields, and also practicing on these fields. I have learned more before the General Court of the Court of Justice than in most of the books, even written by leading experts on of that field. We need also a personal real experience of trial between those judges. And as a third step, I accepted many jobs, many occupations in the public sector as administrator of some public bodies, not on a political base, but as an expert or presumed expert of some fields. For that, I administered the Italian National Statistical Office for about 10 years. And I was in other many occupations since the 90s up to the present. So, in short, a life full of many things. I think for myself an interesting life, I remain still active, very active, even aged, as you can see from my hair. I have not finished at all our jubilation at my university. I continue not only here but everywhere. I am now organizing a European book with the participation of leading experts of the banking union in Europe, and in comparison with the legal discipline of the third countries on the same topic. So it is a great pleasure to be president of the faculty board, to give my contribution to the birth of this institution, which is, in my view, a natural result of what we thought, we hoped to do since the 70s of last century. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Chiti. Now I'd like to move on to our next speaker, Professor Martina Conticelli. She's also a member of the faculty board. She's currently a professor of public law at Tor Vergata University, where she teaches economic public law, and she will also be joining us in this upcoming semester teaching the students of the ELGS. So please tell us more about yourself.
Thanks, Chiti. It is not easy to speak. It is not easy to speak after Mario Chiti, even more difficult if that could be possible. We made it. Okay. My actual position is being associate professor in public law. I have two courses in Tor Vergata. I have a course in economic public law and a course which is an introduction to legal systems. I teach in English, which is rare for the Italian experience, because in Italy people, lawyers, something was said by Professor Chiti, but about a different period, but sometimes things remain the same. So luckily I'm in a faculty of economics, and economists are ready to fight in the globalized world. So I teach in two courses which are taught in English. I will come to this point later on. Furthermore, I am a coordinator of a PhD course in theory of markets, contracts and services there in Vergata, and I'm the coordinator of a master in competition and regulation. Well, this is my actual position. How did I get here? First steps, let's say. First steps of a career, I hope so. Well, I graduated in La Sapienza in Rome. I chose, first of all, the man. I chose the supervisor, which was Professor Cassese. And differently from Professor Chiti, I could benefit of Professor Chiti's works. It's not because you're here. I really need to say that because we were studying European administrative law, and at that time we got the benefit of, we didn't have to do the effort which they made, because we had our field traced. After my graduation, I discussed a thesis on the separation between the regime of network, of infrastructure, and the provision of service in public utilities in 1998. Quite contemporarily, the European Union was adopting the legislation on this, so it was considered an experimental work on public utilities at that time. After my graduation, I came to Greece. I came at the EPLO. It was not the EPLO, maybe. It was something different, yes. It was August. I graduated in May, and then Professor Cassese said that there was a call for attending an academy on European administrative law. And I must say that this experience opened even more my mind, because here in this context, in this environment where we are, you can have, I tell you, because it must be highlighted and it must be profited by you, you can have the chance of meeting extraordinary professors and exchanging ideas in a context which allows you to speak honestly, frankly, and directly. The best friendship all over the world, and the best meeting with professors, I had them partly here, I must say, and partly attending the works of the chair of Professor Cassese. He used to invite many people. We had something like 2 meetings as a PhD students. I had 2 meetings per month. Most of the people most of the names have been already cited by Professor Chiti. I might tell you that at that time, and in many days of my life, I consider that I did not realize immediately which was the relevance of what I was being told during a lecture or by the specific guest. I just followed what Professor Cassese said I had to do. Go there, ask questions, read the papers, and so on. But through the time, I realized at a certain point that I acquired an overall system of information, of knowledge, of capacities, and I did that without really completely realizing, so very easily. How? I could do that because I profited of the networking, which was already quoted by Professor Chiti. Networking, connections, and also personal relationships. All that was possible because my supervisor, as Professor Chiti, was someone who never thought about law as a closed and enclosed system. And that is the chance you may have, that is given by the experience of European administrative law, as well as now by the emerging, even if not the same as European administrative law, the emerging system of global administrative law. Now some final remarks about my interest. I have been working on global administrative law. I've been working on public utilities, I told you. Now I'm working on expropriatory regulation. Together with Giacinto della Cananea, with whom I work, he is the PI of this project, but we were awarded an ERC grant, and we were the first Italian lawyers to be awarded that on a new project which is about the common core of European administrative laws. What we are trying to do is to apply the theory of the common core, which was elaborated by private lawyers, is a way to make a comparison, a way to deal with comparative law, to the experience of administrative laws. The point here is that there was someone at a certain point that denied the possibility of comparing administrative law for many reasons, which were already discussed also by Professor Chiti. We want to find the emerging common core in European administrative laws. Many factors could be vehicles for the sharing of common principles and common traditions. So we are going to investigate that now, and this is a new project which I can tell you about. I think I can stop here.
So thank you very much, Professor Conticelli. And now we'll proceed to Professor David Duarte, who's also a member of the faculty board. He is a professor at the University of Lisbon, teaching jurisprudence, administrative law, fundamental rights. And as I mentioned previously, teaching many hours today are ELGS students, so please tell us as much as you are able to about yourself and your career.
Thank you, Cheryl. I will be very brief, mainly for two main reasons. The first one is that my CV is very boring, so I really don't have much to say. And the second reason is that I really feel quite uncomfortable to speak about myself, so I was a totally casting mistake in this table. It was a great error by the organization. Nevertheless, I think that after so many years teaching, we developed some opinions about careers, about options, about decisions. And I will be very happy if you want to make me any question. I will give my opinion. I have almost opinions about everything. So I will be very happy to ask those things. I will only say two or three things. As Cheryl just told us, I originally come from administrative law, but some 15, 20 years ago, I started to study very much legal theory and jurisprudence, And I'm very excited with my work. Not for being my work, but I do really love what I do. And this is something special. I can say that I'm happy by studying, by trying to know more things, to connect the things I'm learning, I'm studying. I really take very much pleasure by teaching and discussing with my students. And while I'm doing this, I'm learning, and I think learning is probably one of the most beautiful things we can do in life. And that's, I would say, in a single word, how can I sum my career? I know there is someone in the room with a strong will to make a question, so I will stop here. And if there is someone in this situation, please present himself or herself, okay? Thank you very much. Thank you for a question. You asked me that you wanted to make a question, so you did. But nevertheless, it's not totally accurate. I'm not a lawyer in the meaning of an attorney. I'm a consultant. There are many big law firms in Lisbon that do not have people specialized on administrative law or even fundamental rights or things like that. And when they have big cases, they tend to go to the university and ask for some kind of support, which means that sometimes I have lots of work coming from this kind of very specific demands from these law firms. But it is also possible that I am almost 1 year or 1 year and a half without work whatsoever, which is not very good because they pay very badly in Lisbon University. But which means that having lots of work is great. So it's just a matter of trying to coordinate things. There is something very nice on the profession of being a professor in a university, is that you can just manage your time. You have those precise schedules, and you have to give classes at this time and at that time. But if you have to prepare them, if you have to study to write a paper or an article, you can do it at 3 a.m. in the main square of the city or whatever you want. The possibility of having the control of your time is probably one of the best things we have in our profession. So if we are a little bit smart, we can coordinate all this and do the two things at the same time. Okay? Thank you.
Just a few words. My suggestion is in your first period of studies not to combine legal profession and the studies in general. It's very difficult indeed. I think that for your PhD and a few years more, you have just to study, to research, to create your own scientific personality. And then it's possible. When a precise date is difficult to say, but say in the late 30s of your life, in principle, it's possible to combine the two things, not at the very beginning. This has been my experience, but I'm now an historical professor. I think that is still today, it's necessary to restrain yourself for about 10 years about studies, researching, and nothing else.
May I just add one thing? In addition to what Professor Chiti was saying, I want to underline the fact that this is really the time when you will be more productive. So I want to underline this because I realized the most of what I've learned more or less till the 30th. So this will be an important period for you. Do not forget to really build up your basis, the foundations of what you will be in the future as a lawyer. So just wanted to underline the point which was raised.
It's not simple to say just a few words about that. Firstly, if you are living, which is your country?
I'm Greek.
Greek. So in Greece you have good universities. Yes, my view is that for the first degree, the basic law degree, it's, in my view, better to remain at home if you are working in a country with good universities. Here in Greece there are at least 3 or 4 good places. But then, just after the law degree, you have to move away. Not only to England or Germany or the few leading European countries, but also for new countries. There are now very good universities also in the Latin America or in Central America. The world is larger than supposed a decade ago. So after the degree, move away quickly. And if you are PhD in the best place according to your interest. So it depends. Near my state university in Florence, there is the European University Institute on the hills of Fiesole. That is a very good place, but with a few opportunities. There is a very hard competition for about 10 places for years, about law. So you can apply also in other places. But the PhD is a basic point for your career. And then you have to get some other experiences, especially in the public sector. There are not only in the local public bodies, but also at the European institutions, a lot of opportunities for that. So please have an idea to have a stage, a long period, 6 months or 1 year, at those institutions or bodies. So step by step, you have to create your own personality. And for that, I insist that you need almost at least 10 years, at least.
May I add something? Under the substantial perspective, I think that globalization is a challenge for legal education. It was something like that also for Europeanization, but Europeanization was a phenomenon, is a phenomenon which has different roots and may rely on different concepts and conceptual tools. Globalization on the substantial point of view, Professor Chiti was discussing about other profiles, but under the substantial point of view for the legal scholar and its education, for the public law legal scholar in particular, globalization is a challenge because it creates, let's say, a challenge in not only in the selection of the tools which needs to be given to the legal scholar, but also, for instance, in the use of language. I was telling you about the fact that I'm teaching in English, and this is possible only because I'm in an economic in a faculty of economics. In a law faculty, it would be rarely accepted or just accepted for few small courses. And for instance, I give you an example. The point of the language is in general not something which cannot be taken for granted. In Italy, there is a high debate on whether it is possible to teach at the university in English. And there was also a ruling by the Constitutional Court which said that if you teach a course in English, you have to be sure to provide the same course into Italian for reasons of protection of our language. So all this movement is something which we have to take into account when we deal with globalization and the law. And according to me, for the public lawyer, one of the challenges for its education is exactly globalization.
Okay, I'm not sure that I did understand precisely your question. I think you asked for what would be the key decisions for having a good legal education. Is that so?
No, my question is how legal education has changed to today compared to the past due to globalization or Europeanization of studies.
But that question presupposes that we have a big past to compare,
Yes, of course.
even though I don't have that big past to compare. I think the main point is that it is totally impossible to be a scholar nowadays without using English. Science adopted English as the conventional language of science. So no matter in which field, mainly on hard sciences like biology or physics, but even in law, science of law nowadays is written and spoken in English. Even the German, that are so proud, already created a journal called the German Law Journal because they understood that they have to publish in English in order to reach the American market. So English is totally decisive. And I would say that for a student, the first decision I would take is leave your country immediately. As soon as you finish your degree, no matter what country is your country, even if you are in the US, and go to other places to meet other legal cultures, read other books. And I think this is the great change that happened in the past 20, 30 years. And no matter to cheat us ourselves about this thing of English, because I'm totally convinced, and I think there are strong reasons for that, that in 20, 30 years' time, almost our legal conversations, even inside our countries, will be more or less in English. The most astonishing example for me are the Dutch. The Dutch nowadays, they already teach almost everything in English. They almost accept only PhD theses in English. They publish always in English. And this gives them, in my personal opinion, a very competitive advance. So I think nowadays English is the key. It's the biggest change among them all. Okay?
Later,
You just created a scientific controversy among scholars.
of course, this is very vital. It is vital.
So I believe we have time for just 2 more questions, please.
That's good tactics. Yeah, of course. Of course, of course. That's a very hard question. I would say that if one, it depends very much on the purpose. If you want to be a very well-educated person, knowing a little bit of everything, that's obviously the first option. But I think nowadays you won't be, I would say this way, put things this way, no one without knowing something very, very deeply. Some area of knowledge, you have to know it deeply, because if you don't know some area deeply, you won't be competitive in the market. But besides this, if you are only very aware of something very deeply without knowing anything at all about the world, you probably won't have a very nice life. So I think that specialization is totally indispensable. So I wouldn't advise my son, for instance, to make these 4 years of physics and then 3 years of sociology and then 4 years of philosophy of language. I wouldn't give that advice, but I would give the advice to first get a very strong and deeply education on something, and then larger your horizons. That I would say that. Okay.
I have nothing to add.
No, my idea is once again a bit different. In the first part of your scientific career, and not only scientific, I think you have to learn the general law. Don't specialize too much in a specific field. Later, when you have gained general mood, general experience, you can go in depth in whatever you like. It's easier later than at the first stage to be an expert of something very, very narrow and then become a journalist one. The way is the opposite. Remain a general lawyer for as long as possible, and then you have to specialize for professional life, for economic reasons, for the necessity to get a job somewhere in the private or the public sector. But at the first stage, you have to remain a generalist. I think that law is a circular experience which cannot be restricted on very specific points, very specific fields.
Sorry?
No.
Sorry.
No. My final remark about the different peculiarities of our European continent. I'm speaking as a public lawyer, as an administrative lawyer. It is easy to say that no other region in the world has so many different experiences according to the history, to the past, to the culture, to the national civilizations, and so on. We have in Europe at least 6 or 7 important public models, public law models for discipline, for institutions, and so on. I think this is a richness for Europe. We cannot abandon this lot of peculiarities according to the general idea of an increase in harmonization or worse, globalization of everything, including the language. When I am before the Court of Justice, I prefer to speak my own mother language because all the nuances of my arguments can be explained just in my mother language, which is the language of Roman law and 2,000 years of experience also for procedural law. But the same is for Spain, perhaps also for Portugal, and for other countries. Our languages are very rich, very complicated, not easy to learn and to speak, but this is a richness. To focus everything on the English language, from the English culture, from Anglo-Saxon cultural experience, I think it's a mistake, a great mistake. And the Treaty of Lisbon, signed in where my has with a great opportunity to preserve this peculiarity. They try to create an harmonized model, an harmonized system, but maintaining the national, cultural, different peculiarities. I think this is not just a step towards an even more integration. No. I think it's the end of the story. Maintain our peculiarities, or at least up when they are compatible with the general European framework. I am speaking of a neurocompatibility of the national differences.
So I guess the last question to Dr. Vulgaris. Okay. Yeah. If I may, I'll bring you up to speed. Each speaker did a short presentation of themselves about their career path, giving some advice of things that should be done, perhaps should be avoided. And if you could indulge us for a few minutes, of course, we'd be very grateful.
Right, okay. So I guess it depends what you want to do with your degree in political science. It depends on what you want to do with your degree. So the challenges I find, you know what I find the challenge in political science right now? Is this the right thing to say? I think there's a lot of political scientists walking around right now that it's a very saturated degree, right? It's a very saturated in the degree. I suspect it would be the same with law, to be honest with you, at least in Canada and in Ireland. There's a lot of lawyers that are trained that are unable to find jobs. I mean, it's frank as that, right? So in political science, what I think happens is a lot of people get the degrees and they stop with the undergraduate degree and they're unable to move on. So indirectly, I'm kind of saying you need to get a master's these days to be able to get a position in government. I think 20 years ago when I was on the market, that wasn't the case. I think with an undergraduate degree, you could have maybe gone to work with foreign affairs or finance or anything equivalent in your national jurisdictions. Even working in the European Commission at the time, 30 years ago, I think you would have been okay with an undergraduate degree. So the real challenge, I think, is finding that right master's. But it has to be a right master's on both counts. You could go to like your Harvards or your Yales, but it may not interest you, and it may not give you the training that's adequate to come back to Europe. Or you can work in an environment that gives you the training you're happy with, but that you can use also. I mean, the advantage I see to coming here, for example, would be the EPLO it's effectively an international organization, and it gives you that credibility going onto the market, right? That's what I would see if I were an undergraduate looking for a master's, why I would come here. But look, it's, I think you have to be positive above all. I don't know if that answers your question. You gotta be positive. Yeah. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
May I ask you a question? I have a question to all of you, because you mentioned before the importance of learning English, and you just mentioned about that graduate students face a problem of not being hired.
Mhm.
Can you give like your opinions about what other qualities we have to acquire in order to be like to accomplish something in the future? It's the question to all of you.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'm not sure the question. At least I didn't get the question exactly. Are you saying? Oh, all right. So here I'm very clear about this with all my students. It's your ability to analyze and solve problems, right? So I lecture in EU politics, and every year the number of MEPs changes. Literally every time there's a new there's a new election, the number of factual knowledge, specific knowledge is important, but it's not really what's going to get you the position, I don't think, or at least maintain your interest in the position. It's going to be able to look at a problem, see what's essential to answer that problem, and throw the rest of it away and solve the problem. That for me is analytical thinking, right? If you can do it in a multilingual environment, perfect, right? I think but that's the thing I would say is your most important skill set.
I would just say something very maybe obvious. I would say that one of the most qualities, what David was saying before, the capacity to choose something you like, because if you like it, you will get the most. You will never give up. I mean, as an answer, I'm not discussing about capacities, but I'm discussing about involvement and passion and I mean, what can give you the will to go on and to go on, the extra boost. I think so.
Okay.
I think that's a fair point too. So I guess in context, at least in Trinity, I teach so many, like my first year undergraduate class is 400 students, right? And then my third year EU class is 100. So in any one year, I'll teach 500 students, say, right? But the ones that I've always seen that go on to become successful, either at the European Union level, in the Commission, the Parliament, Council of Europe, are the ones that could take very complex ideas and make them very simple, right? It's that communication skill to a large audience, or to let's better said, a non-specialist audience, that's incredibly important. And a good education will give you that ability. Absolutely, yeah.
So if there are no further questions, I think that we can draw some conclusions from our discussion. I'll try to tiptoe around the sticky bits. And I'd also like to draw together some things that came out of Professor Rajchari's talk earlier. So since this is an audience from the legal side, the governance side, and also the interdisciplinary side, it seems to me that there are some different career paths that could be of interest to parties on all sides. Academia and research obviously is very clear. It's clear from the people on the panel, but it doesn't necessarily have to go down that path. So some other options that came out of our talks were a position in the public sector, being a practicing lawyer, consulting, advocacy, working for an NGO, becoming a lobbyist, or working at an international organization. I'm sure that I'm missing many other opportunities that were brought up in the different talks, but that's just a short summary of them. And trying to bring up some of the highlights from our discussions, I guess that some of the key advice that that the panel has given to the students are the following: language skills. English and also embracing your national language or other languages is obviously something that will be important for your future career paths. Problem-solving skills and analytical skills. Try to avoid combining work and studies if possible, at least at the undergraduate level. We had a suggestion to study outside of your country at the master's level if possible. Work hard while you're young, while you have the energy, because your most productive years are up until the 30s, I understood. I still have some time, maybe. Don't kill my hope. The need for a master's degree and a PhD degree. And I understand that there is an argument about the need to be a generalist or to be a specialist. Yes. But I think that everyone will agree that the most important thing is to do something that you love. So I'd like to conclude the panel on that note. And will we be continuing with the second half of Professor Chari's lecture? Okay. Okay, so thank you very much to the panelists. Thank you.